The entire country has been glued to the case coming out of Idaho, the 4 university students who were brutally murdered. The country is glued wondering, where are the updates? What's going on? What's the truth? Because new updates seem to be coming out every day, some factual and some completely fabricated. So what is the truth? What happened to these 4 kids? Who's responsible? And where is the update and what's the progress with the investigation? So today I'm going to take you through everything we know now and where the case currently stands. Hey guys, I'm Elise and this is 10 to Life. Go ahead and smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and let's get into it.
10 to Life with Elise starts right now.
This week marks 1 month since the last day the 4 University of Idaho students, Xana, Maddie, Kaylee, and Ethan, were last seen alive before they were brutally murdered in their home in the early hours of November 13th. If you are new to this case, go back and check out some of my previous videos so that you can get fully up to speed on the case details, where I broke everything down more comprehensively. I will leave a link to that playlist in the description and in the pinned comments below. If you've been following the case more closely, you know that there has been so much confusion, rumors, misinformation, and straight up lies. But more than anything else, there are so many questions as the entire country is just glued to this story. Who is responsible for this horrific crime? What was their motive? And why haven't they been caught? We have all been waiting on pins and needles for answers as each day passes, hoping there will be an update. The Moscow community is still mourning, and my heart is just shattered for all of the victims' families and friends. Hopefully this video will be a helpful update on everything we know so far. Police updates, interviews, new leads, facts versus fiction, just everything in chronological order, getting to the latest updates that came out just last night. Xana's mom, Kara Northington, went on News Nation, where she spoke out for the first time. She said the police have not been helpful in providing updates and that she doesn't know anything. This isn't the first time one of the grieving parents has gone on national TV and said basically the same thing, and we're going to get to that shortly. During the whole interview, you can hear Kara on the phone in tears, pleading for help to get information.
I learn more on the news and on TV than they have said to me. Well, what I do know is not nearly enough. We need more answers. There is so much more that can be done that has not been done. And I just know that there's GPS, NASA, to find out who went into that home that night. I know that. Why hasn't that been looked into? Why hasn't that been accessed? I just had a question about the other 2 roommates who were there on the first floor, and I just wonder, wasn't something heard, or the surviving roommates that were there, they had to have heard something. They had to have the dog something.
She also said that Xana's dad either fixed or replaced the lock on Xana's door, or possibly another door, the weekend before the murders when he was in Moscow. She was a little unsure about which door, however. After listening to the full interview, I'm not exactly sure how close the relationship between Xana and her mom was. She didn't know what kind of car Xana drove, and I don't really know how that is possible. So maybe take some of that information she has with a grain of salt, and I don't mean that offensively, just saying that Xana's dad may know more. Maybe he is the police's contact for Xana's family. Honestly, I have to give it up to my girl Ashley for this interview because she did a pretty solid job getting the insight on probably the biggest question in this case that we have all been wondering about, or at least for me. Why was the 911 call about someone unconscious if the house had blood everywhere and this horrific scene had been described to law enforcement?
If Dylan and Bethany came upstairs and were trying to wake Xana, because they were trying to wake one of their roommates. Do you know if it was your daughter they were trying to wake?
I don't have that answer either. I'm sorry.
It's okay. And did they say that they could not get beyond a locked door And that's why they had no idea what was on the other side of the bedroom door and called in an unconscious person?
I believe that's right.
What do you know about that?
That they called in an unconscious person. I know that. But beyond that, I don't know.
So it's hard for you to understand as well why, if there was such a terrible crime that had been committed, the roommates might not have seen the evidence of that crime.
Absolutely, yes.
I've seen your comments on my last video about another scenario with the 911 call about somebody fainting outside. I did my best to see if any of that information was accurate. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's just a nasty rumor that started on Reddit, and I haven't seen anything so far to prove its validity or really anything from any credible sources. I haven't seen anyone repost the original post anywhere, and I personally could not find the original post. And trust me, I searched to the Instagram depths of hell looking for this, where this alleged bystander commented and explained their story on one of the victims' Instagrams. What I have seen is literally the same narrative being copy and pasted as the story of what someone completely anonymous happened to see on Instagram. And I'm sorry, but why on earth someone wouldn't take a screenshot of the comment instead of typing it all out and then posting it on Reddit is beyond me. And actually a little sus in my opinion, but who knows. Kaylee's mom, Christy, was also asked about this.
We know nothing about that whole phone call. We've asked, and it's, I mean, I know that a lot of people want to know, but that's just not our agenda. We just are like, somebody called 911, somebody was reported unconscious. We don't really know. I mean, we've heard so many different things and nothing has been clarified or been told to us at all. And I mean, I don't know if I personally have asked anything about that. I don't know if you have asked that, but we know.
I'd imagine that if the whole 911 story was true, she would know about it. A reporter from Law and Crime spoke with Aaron Snell, the communications director for the Moscow PD, and he said that the 911 call may be released sooner than later. The 911 call will give us way more insight than any further speculation at this point. If you remember the last press conference on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, police were asked why they wouldn't tell the public who the target was. They were pretty adamant in their response as well.
Sir, why not tell the public who the target was? You've said that this was a targeted attack. Why not tell the public who was targeted? If it was multiple people, it would go a long ways to telling the public what you're looking for and who you're looking for, the type of person you're looking for. Why not do that to alleviate some of the fears out there in the community?
Well, first and foremost, we have the integrity of the investigation to preserve. And we feel like that information is integral to us and how we conduct our investigation. Releasing that to the public may or may not flood us with a lot of information that's not relevant or specific to what we're looking at.
Don't you want more information from the public?
We do want more information, but we don't want to put our investigation in jeopardy by releasing what we have. There's always a balance between what you're willing to release versus what you're trying to gather. We've told the public very clearly from the beginning that we're looking for a knife. We've told the public very clearly from the beginning that we believe it was a targeted attack. I mean, to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point because we're not going to release why we think that.
However, Brian Enton spoke to the prosecuting attorney, who said something different.
Like the word targeted has had different understandings for different people who are listening, and perhaps isn't the best word to use. The bottom line is whoever's responsible for this is still at large. That can't be changed. My understanding is the investigators believe that whoever's responsible was specifically looking at this particular residence, but that's all that they can offer at this point. I don't think they can say that at this point. They are still, that's part of the investigation, is trying to determine who might have been the target.
Moscow PD quickly put out a statement about this, saying, "We remain consistent in our belief that this was a targeted attack, but investigators have not concluded if the target was the residents or if it was the occupants. We continue receiving inquiries about comments made by Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson, who said that the suspects specifically looked at the victim's residence and that one or more of the occupants were undoubtedly targeted. The Moscow Police Department is the only official information provider regarding this case." Whatever that means, and also telling the prosecutor to kind of just stuff it, put a sock in it. Kaylee's dad, Steve, has been on multiple news channels trying to find answers and has expressed his growing frustration with the police.
Straight in their eyes, the lead detective looked me in his eyes. I have no doubt he's working as hard as he can, but somebody isn't communicating. There's nothing being released. It seems like they're trying to suppress the story. We want to put rewards out there, like, don't do that. Yeah, I get it. Your town doesn't want to have reward posters posted all over when you come and you do your rush. You're not going to get a lot of students if they see those things. But this community is not going to heal until this guy's pulled off the streets. It ain't going to happen. Think it through. It's not going to happen. He has to be off the streets. We all are working for the same thing.
Y'all get an update from the police about the investigation?
There was nothing. We have no updates for you.
There was no update. They needed me to sign a waiver form so that they could investigate something.
Some mail.
That was mail related. So we're working with them. We're not selling them out. We love our law support.
The FBI, everybody that's here. We just have no information as family, and it gets tough day after day after day. I mean, every day you just wake up and think today's the day. We're going to hear something, and you see these, there's a break in the case, and it'll just be something stupid.
The sixth person on the lease that was never there. Stop playing games. This is serious. These are people's lives, and this is the future of this community. There's going to be 10,000, 15,000 kids that come into this community next year, or they don't. So be serious.
I think a lot of parents can relate to his frustrations here. Your child has just been brutally murdered, and you want answers. That is normal. What are parents supposed to do in this situation? What would you do? Of course, the police are not going to provide them with a play-by-play of every single thing in the investigation, and it's clear to me that maybe that's not what they're asking for. Maybe they just want one phone call a day, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, just saying, "Hey guys, we're still working hard. We could be getting closer." Or even if it's the complete opposite case of that, saying, "Hey, we're still working really hard, but all of the things we've done today haven't panned out, but we're going to keep on going." I'm not exactly sure what that update would look like, just something. Give the family anything. Is there nobody there that can do that for these grieving parents, especially with how crazy the rumor mill is becoming? They are the only credible source here. So being able to update the parents effectively with what's true, what's not, what progress has or has not been made is absolutely critical right now. The Moscow Police Communications Director, Aaron Snell, is certainly making his rounds with the media, with interviews and TV appearances. So I'd assume he'd have some time to update the family as well. I think the parents fully understand that if they were getting updates more often, they would need to stay tight-lipped and not go on national television. I think they're only doing that right now because they don't know what else to do. And maybe some clear expectations management on the police ends could help that, but I don't know. Kaylee's parents spoke more about that targeted, not targeted walk back from the police.
They have told us that it was targeted, but they told us they can't tell who. We asked specifically, and they said, "We'll try to get that information to you." And they got back to us a day or so later, and they said, "We're sorry, we can't give you that information." But then a day later, we saw in the news that it was not targeted, or they think the whole house was targeted. But
I'll cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Their means of death don't match.
Maddie's
They don't.
and Kaylee's cause of death, it does not match based on the autopsy report.
They don't match.
Would indicate that one of them.
He doesn't have to
may
go
have
up
been
the
target.
steps. Let's stop playing games, guys. I need somebody to step up and be an alpha. Be somebody to be a leader. Don't make me do it. I don't want to do it. He doesn't have to go up the steps. Their points of damage don't match. I'm just gonna say it. It wasn't leaked to me. I earned that. I paid for that funeral. I paid for that. It's my right. You ain't taking that from me.
calm down.
If you don't want to say nothing, that's your bet. But don't say I'm leaking anything. I paid that bill. Sent my daughter to college to get an education. She came back in the box, and I can speak on that.
Let's pause right here for a second to discuss. So Maddie and Kaylee's autopsies don't match. Their points of damage don't match, was the quote. He wasn't specific on what didn't match, like if Maddie or Kaylee were hurt more than the other. We also don't know if he meant that both Kaylee and Maddie's injuries were worse than Ethan and Xana's, or vice versa. However, he said he doesn't have to go up the steps. Many people have been trying to figure out exactly what that means. Luckily, Steve clarified this in another interview on Fox.
There's a couple things that tell me with common sense, but I'm not a professional, so I want to specify that. But they've said the entry point was the slider or the window. It was in the middle floor. So to me, he doesn't have to go upstairs. His entry and exit are available without having to go upstairs or downstairs. Looks like he probably may have not gone downstairs. We don't know that for sure, but he obviously went upstairs. So I'm using logic that he chose to go up there when he didn't have to. And I can kind of tell by my daughter's texts, messages. She did call 911. She wasn't saying anything along the lines of like she'd heard something or she was in fear. So I'm just putting the dots together. As far as the investigators, they're very tight-lipped and they're keeping everything close to their vest. And I understand that, and I'm probably not the right person to share all these things with. So I'm just trusting them that their case is super tight and they don't really need to reach out to the community. And, all the evidence is right there in the house.
Steve also said that he plans to hire either a private investigator or a lawyer to see what they can do to help solve some transparency issues for him by formally requesting documents and things of that nature. Steve said that he has consulted with multiple attorneys on this, but nothing is set in stone yet. And a day later, this came out.
And we have breaking news tonight. New details that we have just confirmed. News Nation is learning that Kaylee Goncalves' injuries were significantly more brutal than her best friend Maddie's injuries, which may end up being a very, very important piece of evidence when it comes to determining who the target was in this attack. I have learned Kaylee and Maddie were in an upstairs room in the house, so the killer had to go specifically upstairs.
So Kaylee's injuries were significantly more brutal than the others. Does this make her the target? Does this eliminate the house being a target in general? We still don't know that answer, and neither do the police, according to what they have released. Shortly after, police body cam footage was released of an alcohol-related incident that happened at 3:01 a.m. on November 13th in the Bandfield, which is an area right between the house on King Road and the Sigma Chi house. Police said that this is not related to the murder investigations, and the body cam footage shows that.
Oscar PD, all three of you. You too. Hello, how old are you guys? Take it, not 21?
Yeah.
19. 19?
Yep.
Okay, is there a reason why you didn't stop back there?
I'm not going to play the full body cam footage on here, but I tried to look and see if there was anything that I could see in the background, and I couldn't see anything at all, even though some people are saying that they do. Because honestly, at this point, trying to see if a faraway light could have been a certain vehicle makes tail lights, or even a vehicle at all, would probably be just as effective as reading tea leaves, given the quality of the video and because the background was so dark. And if you read tea leaves, don't come for me. That wasn't meant as an insult. I'm just saying it's not always accurate. Now, on December 7th, the Moscow Police Department released a statement that had finally had some new information in it, saying detectives are interested in speaking with the occupants of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra with an unknown license plate. Tips and leads have led investigators to look for additional information about a vehicle being in the immediate area of the King Street residence during the early morning hours of November 13th. Investigators believe the occupants of this vehicle may have critical information to share regarding this case. These pictures are not the real car. They are stock images to help give people an idea of the car and what it looks like. Now, this was definitely the biggest update that we've had so far in this case as of late. This new information led so many people to calling in tips, and the tip line was actually redirected to an FBI call center. Police Chief James Fry briefly touched on the white vehicle and concerns of harassment online due to speculation and rumors in an interview by someone who works at the police station, not an independent reporter. This video was released by the Moscow Police Department on their YouTube channel on December 9th. This came after the latest statement was released.
We'll start with the white car. How many tips are coming in and how are police using them?
We've had an amazing amount of tips come in on the white car. We appreciate everybody's help that has been sending in those tips, and investigators are vetting those and they're following up on those, and the response has been very great. We appreciate all the help from across the nation and our community.
In some cases, we're hearing that people are borderline being harassed by speculation and rumors out there. What are police doing about that?
Well, what we want people to know is that individuals who are being harassed in this situation, people need to be careful, because some of it's happening online, some of it's happening through phone calls and in person, and people could be charged possibly in the future if it continues to a point where it reaches a criminal element.
In this statement, police say investigators have been monitoring online activity related to this ongoing and active case and are aware of the large amount of rumors and misinformation being shared, as well as harassing and threatening behavior towards potentially involved parties. So if you've been on Reddit, Facebook groups, TikTok, Instagram, or really anywhere, you probably know exactly what the police are referring to here. I'm not the YouTube or social media police by any means, because we have talked about conspiracies and rumors on this channel before, but it really has become a bit crazy. And not just in this case. It seems like for a while now, rumors, speculation, and pointing at innocent people, doxing their full names, all of these things have been building and building, and we're now at this crescendo of sorts. So, is social media and online sleuthing hurting this case?
From the start, amateur investigators shared their theories on the Moscow, Idaho quadruple murders. The case has gripped the nation. People are craving as much information as possible, trying to put the pieces together themselves.
I'm going to talk about the slayings in Moscow, Idaho.
I'm wondering if it was a friend, not one of the roommates.
This is just as pretty much everybody talking about this case, pure speculation.
Partly fueled by a lack of information from the police.
Everybody has an opinion and they want to come out and say it. And so what that does is that detracts from the public's ability to trust the information that's out there.
Police have always had to work around rumors. They sift through leads, discarding the hoaxes and the hearsay to try to get to the credible tips. But the sheer volume of tips in this case could take a toll on police resources. But they could also crack the case.
I mean, look, this is a true crime channel, and we discuss theories, possible motives, and relevant things that have come out. So I'm not trying to morally grandstand at all here. Not at all. But anybody harassing or threatening people from things you read or see online is not cool, and quite literally a crime. We don't do that here on this channel, and I would never want anyone watching any videos to do that. I think the overall goal in a lot of these communities is to, of course, crowdsource information and share our theories and speculation, and I think that's okay. Trust me, I'm not above speculation at all. But online harassment and making threats to harm others just based on something you maybe read on Reddit is a crime, and it should be taken very seriously. So please do not do that. The Moscow police are definitely taking it seriously as well. There has to be a middle ground and just basic human decency standards here, because the amount of doxing and public allegations is becoming a bit scary. Also, if you see something and you believe it, that's totally fine, but I encourage you to do your own research and not believe everything you see and read online at first sight. I think most of us were taught at some point to look into the credibility and sources of things we read on the internet and not to just blindly believe it because somebody else said it, but I just want to encourage that as a reminder given how out of control and what a circus this case has become. As of right now, there are still no suspects and no weapon has been found. Police are still looking for credible tips on the white car and for anyone who saw Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, or Xana at the bars or the Sigma Chi party, or any surveillance video that maybe somebody has. Investigators have looked extensively into whether or not Kaylee had a stalker, and they say that they have pursued hundreds of pieces of information about this and have not verified or identified anybody. Kaylee's dog Murphy was unharmed and in another room and never around the crime scene either. Kaylee's sister has also said that Murphy wasn't a big barker, and that's why the barks weren't happening when the suspect entered the house, as so many people are asking. Because people are saying, well, if the dog didn't bark, maybe they knew the attacker, which is certainly possible, but Kaylee's sister is saying that Murphy wasn't a big barker. The police and other law enforcement officials have been back to back in the house several times for various reasons. Sometimes they went inside the house and looked like they were maybe gathering more evidence or taking pictures. At one point, they were outside of the house overseeing the victims' cars towed from the property. Police came back again to supposedly retrieve some of the personal belongings from the victims from their rooms. There was one interesting visit, though, where a group of men wearing plain clothing went into the house for a little bit.
Can you tell us why you're back inside? Can you tell us why we're back inside tonight? Is there anything you can tell us?
A lot of people believe these guys could have been FBI or U.S. Marshals, since they seemed to know the drill about covering their faces and not wanting to deal with the media. So I want to go back and talk about what Kaylee's dad said in that interview we watched a little bit ago.
There's a couple things that tell me with common sense, but I'm not a professional, so I want to specify that. But they've said the entry point was the slider or the window. It was in the middle floor. So to me, he doesn't have to go upstairs. His entry and exit are available without having to go upstairs or downstairs. Looks like he probably may have not gone downstairs. We don't know that for sure, but he obviously went upstairs. So I'm using logic that he chose to go up there when he didn't have to. And I can kind of tell by my daughter's texts, messages. She didn't call 911. She wasn't saying anything along the lines of like she'd heard something or she was in fear. So I'm just putting the dots together. As far as the investigators, they're very tight-lipped and they're keeping everything close to their vest. And I understand that, and I'm probably not the right person to share all these things with. So I'm just trusting them that their case is super tight and they don't really need to reach out to the community. And, all the evidence is right there in the home.
So the killer either came in through the sliding door on the second floor or a window when he entered and exited the house. When Steve said, "I'm using logic," that he chose to go up there when he didn't have to, and when he said he could tell by her text messages that she didn't call 911 and that she didn't hear anything, that immediately made me think that he meant Xana and Ethan were the first two victims, because the killer could have just left, and what noise would Kaylee have heard if it wasn't that? But he then went upstairs to where Maddie and Kaylee were sleeping. We also now know that Kaylee was significantly more brutally injured than Maddie, but not exactly sure about Xana and Ethan. It's interesting because if Kaylee's injuries meant that she was the target, why kill Xana and Ethan first? Why not go straight upstairs? Or maybe kill Kaylee and Maddie first, and then as the killer was leaving, he came across Ethan and Xana. Now, my initial theory when this case first broke was that the suspect entered through the sliding glass door, killed Ethan and Xana because they were on that first level and he wanted to work his way up to his real target, who I also believed was either Maddie or Kaylee, and that's the reason Ethan and Xana were brutally murdered, because they unfortunately got in the way of his plan. And I still believe this, especially given all the information we now know. But I guess my question would be with all of this, how did the killer know that Kaylee would have been upstairs in the first place that night if she was the target? I'm guessing that maybe the suspect opened up the sliding door and saw Ethan and Xana first, or maybe heard them in the room, and that's why that happened and why he went to them first, because he couldn't work his way upstairs to kill Kaylee and risk them overhearing it and coming upstairs and stopping him or calling the police. He had to get them out of the way first. That's my opinion. An article from the Idaho Statesman came out about a neighbor that maybe heard a scream on the night of November 13th. The article says that they spoke to a guy named Inon, who's 30 years old, and said that he lived in the same apartment complex a few doors down from the victim's home for 2 years. He doesn't go to the University of Idaho, and he works as a cook at an upscale restaurant. He said that he got home from work pretty late that night and just did his normal routine: feed the cat, play PlayStation, drink some tea, and practice his stick juggling hobby. He said that he thinks he went to bed around 4 a.m., which would be around the time that the police estimate the murders took place. He said that he can't be certain, but that as he was dozing off, he thinks he may have heard a scream, but didn't think much of it and thought it was just normal college partying going on, and he went to sleep. He said that he spoke to the police on Sunday the 13th and didn't mention the scream. Then a few days later, he went back to the investigators outside the victim's home and reported that a black luxury SUV that he hadn't seen before was parked a few spaces away from the house. Apparently, he saw this as he came home. So if you're like me, you're probably thinking, hi, why is this person just now saying this? Has he gone to the public about this scream? Why is he just now telling this reporter? It seems a little weird, right? Well, luckily, we aren't the only ones thinking that this is a bit sus.
He's told this program exclusively, and I quote, "We have not heard anything about an SUV. However, if there is something we need the public's assistance with, we'll release it like we did for the Hyundai." That neighbor wrote about the crime on Facebook about 12 hours after police found the bodies. And very curiously, he contradicted himself. Let me tell you what he wrote, presumably when his memory was still very fresh, just 12 hours after the murders. Quote, 4 killed in a stabbing across the street. No screams. No evidence. No trace. It is unclear why he is now telling the Idaho Statesman newspaper reporter that he did hear a scream, right when he was going to sleep at 4 a.m., and that he didn't even mention that to the police. Perhaps now the police will re-interview him about what he says he heard and what he says he saw.
Yeah, not only that, but he also has since edited his Facebook post and took out the part that said no screams. However, this isn't the only contradiction from a neighbor or someone who was around the crime scene on November 13th. Do you remember as this story was breaking, there was a neighbor walking their dog around 8:30 or 9 a.m. on Sunday, and they told a reporter that they told the police they saw the front door wide open.
And if that detail was known to the police as well, it sure didn't seem to make its way to this guy, the chief of the police, James Fry, because when asked about it yesterday by the Daily Mail newspaper, Chief Fry said this was news to him. He said this, and I quote the paper, "I'm not even sure where that came from, to be quite honest."
Okay, so the police didn't know about that. How would that not stand out? Wouldn't that be the one thing that they would know, especially since it happened hours before the 911 call was even placed? Let's also go back to the white car that police are now looking for. Police believe that the driver or occupants may have critical information about anything they may have seen, even if they don't think initially that it is something. They also said that the car is not in the body cam footage of the alcohol incident that happened. So I guess my question is, if they really were around the house in the early hours of Sunday morning, why haven't they called the police themselves when this first happened? Why are the police just asking about it now? Is this a similar situation to the front door being wide open? Like maybe they didn't tell police and there is some kind of miscommunication or really complete lack of internal communication within the police department? I don't know. On the other hand, it's possible for whatever reason that for 4 weeks now, they just haven't said anything. But why, or really how? Surely they aren't living under a rock and completely unaware of what's going on. So why haven't they come forward, whoever owns that vehicle? An ex-FBI agent spoke to News Nation and gave his insight from his FBI sources on the white car.
It takes time, but I do believe the car is relevant. My understanding is that it was picked up on some video surveillance being in the neighborhood at or about the time of these homicides. And then also it is possible that this type of vehicle was also seen in the last vicinity of when these individuals, these college students, were out and about prior to coming home. And that's why it was important with respect to trying to identify and contact the individuals in this car.
If that's true, I'm assuming the police really need to find this car, like yesterday. I'm just speculating here, but it seems like this person really doesn't want to talk. And I can only think of one reason why. Or maybe they're completely unaware, they've never heard of this case, and it's nothing, but I highly doubt it. Over the weekend, there were media reports saying that police warned that the killer could strike again, because this weekend was the graduation commencement weekend for all of the winter graduates. Sadly, Kaylee would have been one of the graduates on this stage.
Hundreds of new graduates of the University of Idaho. It is a milestone day, but at this session of commencement, the pomp and circumstance also includes a tragic remembrance.
It's been a tough few weeks for our community, and I want to acknowledge an enormous loss in our Vandal family recently. Ethan Chapin Xana Kernodle, Maddie Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves were taken from us far too soon by a senseless act of violence. They were bright lights on our campus and cherished members of our community.
This weekend had a huge influx of students and parents and extended families in Moscow for the graduation ceremony and for the celebrations afterwards, like dinners and parties and things of that nature. The report went on to say that authorities cautioned those in the area to stay vigilant and travel in groups during the celebration because the killer is still on the loose. Okay, but is that what the police said? No. With commencement this weekend, there will be an influx of people coming in from out of town. Moscow Police Department and Idaho State Police will provide coverage on campus and in the Moscow area. As always, we want to remind the public to stay vigilant, travel in groups, and communicate with family and friends as you travel. If you have any information regarding the case, please email the tip line. We want to thank the public for their continued support. I'm all for safety and staying vigilant and being aware of my surroundings, so I get the generalization of putting out a statement for everyone to be careful. Now let me talk out of the other side of my mouth real quick here, because if the murders were a targeted attack, either on an individual or on the house, like the police keep saying, why are they now making this statement at all? How can it be targeted at someone or their house, but also watch out if you're in Moscow this weekend, and hi, by the way, stay in groups? I don't think the target can be all three, meaning one of the 4 students specifically, the residents at Kings Road, and anyone in Moscow this weekend. So I want to know your thoughts on this, because to me, I think it means that this mass murderer randomly targeted an individual or a house. Side note, of course, I'm just speculating here. On Monday, an article came out from an interview with Kaylee's dad. I know he's grieving, and understandably so, but he is clearly upset with the police here. He described a conversation with the coroner, Kathy, and Steve asked how many times the victims had been stabbed. Right here, Steve is quoting his recollection of what Kathy said, but apparently her response was, "Sir, I don't think stabs is the right word. It was like tears, like this was a strong weapon, not a stab." Steve elaborated more and said, "She said that these were big open gouges. She said it was quick. These weren't something where you were going to be able to call 911. They were not going to slowly bleed out." He also said that a knife slashed open Kaylee's liver and lungs. And Steve added, "They're just being cowards. There are girls walking around the street right now that deserve to know. They should be looking out for a sadistic male." He clarified his thoughts on whether Maddie or Kaylee was the target, and he said he didn't know, but that he had his suspicions. Ethan and Xana were found on the 2nd floor, as we know, and Steve said it was a hell of a battle going on down there from what the coroner told us. Which, wow, if this is true, and I don't doubt Steve at all, we just haven't heard this anywhere else, and I know he is upset and grieving, this was a lot worse than I thought if this is true. Clearly we knew it was a brutal murder, but now I feel like the word brutal doesn't accurately describe it. The last thing Steve said in this article was that even though the coroner told them that they likely died quickly, he doesn't believe that. Now, I do want to add that Kaylee's sister is saying her dad did not say that from Fox and that it was completely taken out of context. It's possible, however, I believe he said it off the record and didn't expect for it to be published. I don't believe that a senior journalist would quote that and do that if it was fake, and especially use it as actual quotes, regardless who the media outlet is. And the article is still up, which further bolsters my belief in that. But who knows? Police also put out a statement on Monday saying that they are working hard and they are not by any means giving up on this at all. Their number one priority is the integrity of the investigation from arrest to guilty verdict, because that's what the victims and their families deserve. The investigation team spent many hours over the weekend going through tips provided to the FBI tip line and the tip line email. Police are still looking for information regarding the white vehicle, and they reiterated that the warning to the public was just in general to stay vigilant. On Tuesday afternoon, a huge break in the case happened regarding the white car that was seen. Detectives collected 8 hours of surveillance video Tuesday morning from a gas station in Moscow, where a clerk saw the white car passing by at 3:45 a.m. on the night of the stabbings. An overnight manager told Fox News that she has been reviewing the tapes a little bit at a time over the past few days, looking for clues in her downtime on the graveyard shift. She said she was not working, though, on the night of the murders. And then apparently on Monday night, she says she reached the 3 o'clock hour and spotted the car. She said she took a picture of the screen and sent it to an email address that police had set up to receive the tips, saying she just had a weird feeling to go get on the cameras. And she's been asking that her name not be publicized out of safety concerns since the suspect still is out there. What we do know, according to her, is that the car drove by very quickly and then turned down a side street off Highway 8. We don't have the footage yet, but we do have this image that she took with her cell phone. I'm hoping that there are some license plates on the car or something that can indicate if there was a solo person inside the vehicle, multiple people, and what that side street was. Then maybe they can pick up traffic cam footages from the surrounding areas now that they have a real timestamp and a lead to go off of. In other breaking news, information was just released that the victim's hands were in fact bagged, and Ashley Banfield explains why here.
Because police will often bag the hands of a murder victim, and for good reason. Because when people fight for their life, they will scratch and they will claw at their killer like their life depends on it. And it is honestly the very last thing that a victim can do to help the police catch the person that ultimately kills them. Because in that scratching frenzy, the killer's skin cells become embedded under the victim's nails. And if that victim happens to claw at the killer's clothing, fibers might also get lodged under those victims' fingernails. And so bagging the hands of a victim preserves that magical, precious evidence as those bodies head off to the office of the medical examiner for autopsy. And today, a report that is exactly what happened to these 4 kids.
Additionally, it's being reported that a fellow YouTuber actually found a black glove at the crime scene around Thanksgiving and that it was almost missed by police. Take a look.
It is a piece of potential evidence everybody is talking about online. The glove that the police almost missed. It was dropped, or it was thrown out outside the home where the 4 college students were stabbed to death in Moscow. And there is a good chance that it would still be there right now, but for a former homicide detective turned podcaster who noticed it while he was actually visiting the scene on Thanksgiving, which is 11 days after the murders. Chris McDonough is a veteran of the Oceanside, California Police Department, and currently he's the director with the National Cold Case Foundation. He's also co-host of the podcast, The Interview Room, and he is live with me tonight. Detective, it's so good to have you. First of all, I am shaking my head as I even think I'm doing this interview with you. Take me there. Tell me what happened. You literally showed up and looked down and said, hello, gentlemen, come over here. Have you seen this? Is that really how simple this was?
Yeah, it really was, Ashley. I mean, it was my wife and I, it was Thanksgiving Day. We happened to be up here in Idaho. And I said to her, I said, hey, let's just go over where that, situation's taking place at the university to get some tape. And we're walking up the street, and the first thing that caught my attention, to be honest with you, was all of the cars still parked on the property. And then I looked over and I saw there was an officer controlling the scene sitting in his vehicle. And I looked to the left and I saw that what appeared to be a glove. And I looked at my wife and I said, is that a glove? And she goes, yeah, I think it is. And so about where Brian was standing tonight, I walked over and looked over, and sure enough, it was a glove. And I immediately got the attention.
You know what I'm going to do? I am going to, Chris, thank you for saying that. When we go back to Brian in a little bit, I'm going to actually ask him to walk me to the exact spot so that everybody who's watching right now gets the full perspective. Sometimes it's hard when you're watching through a one-dimensional TV screen, so I'm going to do that. In the meantime, help me with this one, because you're the murder detective, but you're also the person who found it. What kind of glove was it, and the significance of the kind of glove as pertains to a murder?
Well, I can't really tell what type of glove it is, if it's a male, female. And obviously the significance may be nothing, but it also could be very significant. There appeared to have snow on it, so I assumed it had been there for, quite some time, at least, before the earlier snowfall. I later learned there are photographs of that glove floating online, and you can clearly see it there. And, I was unaware of those at the time. And when I told the officer, I waved him over and I said, hey, you need to come take a look at this. And he walked over and his first words were, oh, wow. And I said, yeah, and I told him, I said, hey, I'm a retired homicide guy. You probably want to collect that, get your evidence people out here to do that. And he took some photographs of it, and I assumed that they, had collected it. I videotaped them doing it just in case, at least taking the photographs. But yeah, it was crazy. It was just sitting there.
And this is, to be clear, it's inside the crime tape. This was not something that you discovered outside the crime tape, but they weren't watching, they weren't looking for it. So they'd had 11 days to scour the outside of the property. And I need to remind our viewers that you're from California, where one of the biggest first cases of my career happened, and a bloody glove was the significant piece of evidence in O.J. Simpson's case, which is why we don't make light of something that's just maybe looks like garbage. Certainly that's just a couple dozen feet from the front door.
Yeah, I mean, the significance of it, is unknown at this point. Obviously, if it is involved, then it could be, very important. If it's not, then, at least you have it and you can put it into evidence just to say it's there. So, the officer, in my opinion, said he was going to bring the evidence folks to come collect it. And I hope they did that, to be honest with you.
So the other key part here is that you, as a homicide detective, you've seen the inside of a courtroom or two. And today the police were telling us part of the reason they're keeping information so close to the guest is to preserve the pristine nature of the prosecution, of the criminal procedure. So I could see a defense attorney watching our interview right now and saying, you didn't even see the most critical evidence, even inside the crime tape for over a week and a half. Like, you leave something too long and that becomes fodder for a defense later on as well. So it's a problem if you don't pick it up for the investigators. It's also a problem for the prosecutors. I'm going to just give you about 20 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%. I mean, and so you got to ask yourself, why were the cars still there for 2 or 3 weeks? I mean, the first thing you do is you work the crime scene from the outside in. You don't work the crime scene from the inside out. And those cars should have been impounded within day 1 or day 2.
So who could be responsible for this? Was this someone that the girls knew? Was this some loner who one of the girls turned down in the past and they were now angry and they were coming back for revenge and just completely lost their shit and went after everyone they saw? Was this some type of sexual fantasy predator? I know they didn't harm them in that way, but maybe this person actually gets off on killing people rather than the act of sex itself. Could it have been a peeping Tom or stalker? Was this a person inside the community? How did they plan this? Certainly seems like it could have been planned. Who would feel that confident to go and kill that many people at once? Or again, did they not expect that many people to be there, and were they just unfortunate casualties because they got in the way? DNA is extremely important in this case, and now that we are around the 4-week mark, hopefully the results will come back in the near future and it will help investigators. Because as I mentioned, this case has turned into a circus. Everybody wants answers. The families want answers. The public wants answers. And people now are getting to the point where they're making up their own answers that are complete BS. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to get into it on here, but I will just say people are starting now to take things into their own hands in such a sick, clout-seeking way of fabricating photos, videos, audio. It is just getting out of hand. So I'm hoping that the police either provide a detailed update for the public soon to debunk so much of this craziness that is going on, or at the very least, and actually not the very least, the very most, I should say, I really hope this DNA comes back and helps the investigators and that they are a step closer to solving this thing and putting whatever monster or monsters are behind this behind bars. So guys, I'm going to keep you updated. I know I don't come on every day with updates in this case. It's because I like to get all of the information, sift through it, figure out what's real, what's not, rather than just hopping on here and rapid firing videos at you. So I will keep you updated, and I'll come back soon with another comprehensive video once we have more information and more updates. So make sure to check back, subscribe if you haven't done so already so that you will get notified when that update happens, and thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to also give this video a thumbs up on your way out. And let me know what you guys think below. Do you still think that this was targeted? Do you think that Kaylee was the target? What do you make of the wounds that Kaylee's dad is describing? What the heck is going on here? Let me know below. All right, guys, thanks again. And until the next one, stay safe. Bye.